After my death, the emperor personally wrote a couplet in my honor, and my descendants wept bitterly at my funeral. Everyone in the capital sighed at my good fortune, having married a man like Ta Tone. But when I opened my eyes again, I was back at 15. That year, Ta Tone was hopelessly in love with my elder sister. He bowed for her, broke his own legs for her, and composed countless poems for her. He came to me, pretending to be troubled. "Dao Yu, I want to marry your sister. Do you think she will accept?" I smiled, neither confirming nor denying, just nodded. "Of course she will. You and my sister are a perfect match, rarely do two people suit each other so well." Ta Tone. "In this life, I will not marry you. I won't be your wife, won't be the caged bird in the Ta family's manor. And I certainly won't love you anymore." The day Ta Tone came to propose was bright and sunny. 3 letters, 6 rituals, 4 sets of gifts, 5 pieces of gold, and even a pair of mandarin ducks he personally hunted. Ta Tone had admired Dao family and Appo's eldest daughter for a long time, and now came to ask for her hand. The legitimate mother sat at the place of honor, a gentle smile at her lips. She was very satisfied with the Ta family and Appo's sincerity, especially that pair of mandarin ducks. Even gold and jade couldn't and Appo's compare with a suitor so devoted. Ta Tone cherished my sister Dao Chao so much, he had put all his heart into this. Behind the beaded curtain, Dao Chao curved her lips, smiling as gently as a blossoming flower. I knew that was provocation. She had never liked me. She always knew where to strike for it to hurt the most. I lowered my eyes, but my heart remained calm. Even though I knew, in my previous life, Ta Tone was my husband for a lifetime. But this life is too short, too bitter. So why not just let go? In the end, the legitimate mother nodded her consent to the marriage. Her gentle smile flawless. On my way back to my quarters, Ta Tone blocked my path. "Dao Yu, where are you running off to?" I looked up at him, a little dazed. Ta Tone, 20 years younger, still so handsome. The Ta family scholar, refined as jade, with an extraordinary bearing. Sunlight shone on his face, making him look even more like a flawless piece of jade, glowing brilliantly. "Dao Yu, I want to marry your sister. Do you think she'll agree?" I stepped back. "She will." Ta Tone frowned, clearly dissatisfied with my answer. "It's up to the elders and the matchmaker. This is just Madame Song agreeing to the match." "But what about Dao Chao herself, does she truly consent?" "Dao Yu, help me ask her, will you? I'm afraid she'll feel wronged." Such earnest, youthful affection. He was about to marry her, yet still worried about her feelings. But back then, when Ta Tone married me, no one ever asked about my wishes. There was no grand bride price, no pair of mandarin ducks carrying his sincerity. I smiled faintly, neither confirming nor denying, just replied calmly. "Ta Tone, you and my sister are a perfect match, there are few couples so well suited in this world. So, there's no need to ask." I gazed at this man so achingly familiar, and sighed softly. "Ta Tone. In this life, I will not marry you. I won't be your wife, won't be the little sparrow in the Ta family's courtyard. And I certainly won't love you anymore." Just as I was about to walk past him, Ta Tone suddenly asked. "It's getting cold. Has Aunt Zhong's chill improved?" Just that one sentence nearly brought tears to my eyes. I took a breath and walked faster. "No need to trouble yourself about it, Ta Tone. From now on, my affairs have nothing to do with you. Even if you might regret all I have suffered. In my previous life, everyone in the capital said I had a good fate. I'd met Ta Tone by chance in Qingzhou. And after returning to the capital, I'd been fortunate enough to become his main wife. All these years, the Ta household's inner court had only one concubine. And under his roof, only my son and daughter, born to me. Everyone admired the love between Ta Tone and me. Of course, there was no shortage of gossip. They said I'd inherited all of Aunt Zhong's seductive charm. Learned how to beguile hearts. Ta Tone punished anyone who spoke ill of me, one by one, and loudly declared, in his heart, he would have only one wife in this lifetime. Back then, I thought Ta Tone truly loved me. But now that I think about it, the only favored concubine in Ta Tone's manner looked 4 or 5 tenths like Dao Chao. My husband loved Dao Chao his entire life. I remember the first time Ta Tone saw her. That night, Aunt Jiang had caught a chill and had a raging fever. The servants flattered the powerful and bullied the weak, refusing to call for a doctor. Seeing Aunt Jiang burn with fever, I disregarded my own status, kneeling and begging Ta Tone. The next day, Aunt Jiang's fever broke. Ta Tone came to visit himself. Just like in Qingzhou, he showered me with praise, admiring my literary talent, my handwriting, my filial piety, my resilience. He spoke endlessly, praising every good thing about me. His gaze was filled with fondness. But right then, Dao Chao walked by. Dressed in a flaming red gown, more dazzling than fire, beautiful enough to blind. Ta Tone glanced at her, and all his compliments died in his throat. A moment later, he withdrew his gaze. I once thought that was just a fleeting moment. But now I realize, that instant must have been eternal for Ta Tone. So long that he would spend a lifetime repaying that breathtaking glance. Aunt Jiang stood waiting for me at the gate. The spring wind was cold. I hurried to her, catching the worry in her eyes. Did Ta Tone come to propose to the eldest daughter? I froze for a moment. I suddenly remembered, in my last life, Aunt Jiang asked me the same thing. Back then, my heart was heavy with grief, and I replied vaguely before returning to my room. Thinking back now, the one who was most heartbroken was my mother. A wave of warmth rose inside me. I patted Aunt Jiang's hand. Don't worry, I don't like Ta Tone. Aunt Jiang wanted to say more, but seeing the clarity in my eyes, she finally relaxed. Night fell, and Dao Chao came to find me. Dressed in bright red, shining in the darkness. She smiled, her voice as clear as a songbird. Dao Yu, do you know why I passed by that day? Dao Chao looked straight at me, every word gentle as the breeze but making it hard to breathe. It was on purpose. I can't stand seeing you do well, and I can't stand that Jiang woman doing well either. As long as you're in pain, she will be too. Anything you cherish, I can take. Even if I don't want it, I can make sure he remembers me, thinks of me, all his life. I looked quietly at her, a silent confrontation. From clothing, to hairpins, to marriage proposals, even the little dog I found as a child. Everything was taken by Dao Chao. Yet, all the things I treasured, she utterly despised. I could never forget the sight of that little dog, covered in blood, lying in my arms, using its last bit of strength to nuzzle my hand. It whimpered twice, as if saying, "It hurts." Its pain was nothing compared to mine. Dao Chao said the next to suffer would be my mother. I knelt in front of her, begging, "Please, show mercy." And so, Aunt Jiang and I were exiled to Qingzhou for 5 long years. I knew she would never let me go. That's why she took away the one I loved as well. I looked at her and let out a soft sigh. Then, turning to everyone, I said, "Yes, I like him very much. So please, in this life and the next, never let go of his hand. Ta Tone, I will not marry you again." The princess consort held a flower banquet. Every young lady and talented maiden had to compose a poem, to be selected by the princess herself. But the world has always favored beauty. That's just how things are, for people as much as things. My elder sister, with her striking looks, was naturally favored by the princess. Dao Chao sat at the highest seat, suddenly glanced at me, and smiled sweetly. My younger sister may not be very beautiful, but she has a wonderful temperament. All the noble girls turned to look at me. Some covered their mouths, snickering. Dao Chao truly was breathtaking, and how could her younger sister ever compare? Just look at those eyes, those brows, how could she match even a fraction of Dao Chao's beauty? Rumor had it I was coveting my own sister's fiancé, discussing poetry with him day after day. TSK, shameless. They whispered. Have you ever seen a younger sister so eager to be her brother-in-law? I straightened my dress and, by chance, met Ta Ton's eyes. His attendant slipped a note into my hand, a few graceful words written on it. "Don't be afraid." I gave a cold little laugh, crumpled up the note, and tore it to shreds. "Ta Ton, the woman you love humiliated me in front of everyone. You dare not stand up to her, yet you cannot let go of your feelings for me. So what am I, in your eyes? Yes, I am plain, and my status is low. I once resented and felt ashamed of it for many years. But I am not the worthless person they think I am. So, I will not love you anymore. I will not care for your crippled legs for another 20 years. I will not manage every detail of the Ta family estate until I'm utterly spent. Nor will I cut my wrist to give you blood when you fall seriously ill. In this life, I, Dao Yu, will never look at you again." A perfectly peaceful flower banquet finally took a turn. The princess summoned me to the front, suspicion in her eyes. "Did you write this poem?" I glanced at the poem, then nodded. Yes, it was written by me. But the princess's expression darkened. "Chow says you plagiarized her poem, and Ta Ton backs her up. How could you, out of jealousy, shamelessly claim your sister's work as your own?" I froze. In my past life, something like this happened too. But back then, I still had some pride, so even if it killed me, I refused to admit I had stolen anyone's work. Yet Ta Ton still stepped forward to support Dao Chow. From that day on, I was branded a thief. Everyone I met looked down on me. All the poems I'd written were credited to Dao Chow. And now, in this life, Ta Ton once again stood up for her. He frowned at me, eyes full of disappointment. Your elder sister has been working hard at her studies lately. This poem is definitely hers. Even if you don't like her, you shouldn't steal someone else's work." I looked quietly at Ta Ton. His brows were elegantly drawn, his eyes like spring water beneath peach blossoms. Once, I liked all those things about him. But now, I felt only a faint disgust. Had he forgotten? He and I exchanged poetry for 5 years in Qingzhou. He could not possibly fail to recognize my handwriting. Or perhaps he did know, but chose to favor Dao Chow anyway. His obvious partiality was enough to make anyone's heart ache. I asked softly. "You're sure this poem is Dao Chow's?" Ta Ton's frown deepened. "If Chow didn't write it, are you saying you did?" "Even if you did, Chow is kind, she'll forgive you." The way he called me you, that old, familiar intimacy. I lowered my head, eyes falling on my embroidered shoes. Little fish swimming among rippling waves, a pattern Ta Ton once praised as delicate and skillful. I am not you. My name is Dao Yu. I don't need freedom granted by Ta Ton, I can set myself free. Ta Ton paused for a moment. Both of us couldn't help recalling the past. 5 years ago, when we met in Qingzhou. The difference was, Aunt Jiang and I were exiled there by Dao Chow. While Ta Ton was a carefree young master, traveling south from the capital. To survive, I copied books and poetry by hand for a living. Once, when I brought a manuscript to a shop, I saw a handsome man in a pale robe holding the poetry collection I'd copied just days before. The shopkeeper grinned, teasing. "The one you were looking for is here." I hesitated, then looked up, meeting that gentle gaze, the faint smile at his lips. So, it was a young lady who penned these words. Coming from an eminent family, Ta Ton's looks and bearing were both exceptional. "My lady, your handwriting is both elegant and bold, unlike that of sheltered noblewomen, but with a hint of the wild mountains." He lightly waved his fan, still smiling. "Forgive me if I'm being presumptuous." I blushed so hard I could barely form a complete sentence. In the end, all I managed was a mumbled, "Thank you." He smiled, his eyes curving gently. Ta Ton ended up staying in Qingzhou for a whole year. All that year, he often visited the bookshop, just to find me. We talked of wind and moonlight, exchanged verses, gambled with words over tea. He picked flowers to tuck into my hair, gave me willow branches as keepsakes. We ground ink and soaked ourselves in poetry together. He praised my handwriting, praised my literary talent. But beyond his admiration, there was also a deep sympathy. The first time Taton called me you, his voice was filled with pity. You, a little fish swimming free, with all directions open to you. Wait until you're 16, you'll have real freedom. I once yearned so much for that real freedom. But in the end, I was imprisoned my whole life. That nickname, you, from Taton, was only ever meant to keep me captive. But all I ever wanted was to be my own you, not his. In that moment, I bowed before the princess consort and said, Princess consort, this poem was indeed not composed by me. It was not my intention to deceive, perhaps I simply remembered it wrong. Knowing now that Taton would always be biased, I could only choose a different path. Taton always felt you had changed so much. In the past, she could spend whole days discussing poetry with him, now, she always kept her distance, barely exchanging a few words before leaving. But he was busy preparing for his wedding with Chow, and had no mind to care about you anymore. Today's flower banquet was arranged at his own request. Qingzhou is famous for its crabapple flowers, and you loved them most of all. All her life, she had 3 regrets. One was that the crabapple flower has no scent. The Prince Shou's manor has the most varieties of crabapple, so he begged for this banquet, as a gift to his confidant. But he never expected that just a few careless words from his fiancée would hurt you so deeply. Chow was pure-hearted, surely she hadn't meant any harm. That's why he wrote that note, hoping to smooth things over. But then, the scandal of you stealing Chow's poem happened. His first reaction was disbelief. You was proud and upright, she would never steal someone else's poem. But he had never met anyone as beautiful as Chow. Her bearing, her gaze, her very presence, just one glance was enough to intoxicate. So when the 2 sisters stood together, the scales in Taton's heart tipped toward Chow. For a brief, confused moment, Taton thought. Maybe you had just made a careless mistake, maybe he only needed to help Chow this once, just once. But when he saw that stubborn, quietly wounded look on Yu's face, a strange fear crept into his heart. As if something was slowly slipping away from him. Taton panicked. He thought. After today's banquet, I must make it up to you. If she's willing to be my concubine, I'll agree. On Dao Chow's face, her smile grew even brighter. She never expected her little sister could be so foolish as to admit the poem wasn't hers. Dao Yu, so shameless, she stole her sister's fiancé and now her poetry, too. If it were me, I'd have killed myself by now. No wonder, being the daughter of a mere kitchen maid, how could she have any virtue? All seduction and no shame. Such women are base to their bones, and dream only of seducing men. What a joke! I stood there calmly and said respectfully to the princess consort. Your Highness, please judge fairly. My eyes simply failed me for a moment. The poem merely resembles one I once wrote, it's not the same. Besides, a woman should have virtue, but if all you do is gossip behind someone's back, how is that different from market women? As soon as I finished, the whole room fell silent. I have never believed women should be bound by virtue and gentleness. My past life was ended by that reputation. But that doesn't mean I cannot fight back. The princess consort, coming from a family of generals, relaxed a little at my words. The second daughter of the Dao family speaks sense. Then, what is this poem you once wrote? I picked up a brush and wrote out a regulated poem, an ode to the crabapple blossom. At first, it was just a simple flower-viewing poem. The crabapple, like embroidered brocade in bloom, is the brightest among spring's flowers. Yet for all its beauty, it bears no fragrance. I look upon the crabapple, harboring a lifelong regret. Only wine can ease it, a little. The poem flowed gracefully, with lavish words, but on closer look, was but empty refinement. I had been Taton's wife for 20 years. Those were not just 20 years of lonely shadow, but also 20 years of reading poetry and witnessing the bitterness of life. So now, Dao Yu holds no more hatred. Only longing and a gentle hope. The crabapple flower is beautiful, today the sky is beautiful. And the me of the future will surely be even better. With bold strokes, I poured out everything in my heart. On seeing this new poem, his first feeling was awe. Then, a sense of unease. A woman making such progress, so quickly, was enough to unsettle anyone. Ta Tone began to fear. He feared you might slip beyond his control. Perhaps, the two poems were indeed similar, and she was right to say her eyes had failed her. The princess consort smiled, returning the poem to me. I bowed even lower. Thank you, your highness, for your fair judgment. But Dao Chao refused to let go. So the content is similar, fine. But can you fake someone's handwriting, too? That poem was clearly in your hand. Ta Tone turned to look at her, surprised. I let out a quiet laugh, meeting his gaze, my eyes quietly asking. See? This is the dazzling woman you love so much. Did you ever think she would push things this far? Ta Tone quickly averted his eyes, not daring to meet mine. And that, somehow, made it all the more ridiculous. I turned and bowed to the princess consort. Your Highness, the poem I wrote carried the fragrance of blossom oil, the scent I always wear on my wrists. Yet the page you returned to me bears no trace of that scent. So, that poem was not penned by me. As for why the handwriting so closely resembles mine, I cannot explain. But in this world, only Ta Tone and my elder sister have ever seen my poem. If your highness wishes, you may ask them how the handwriting came to match mine so perfectly. The princess consort, honest by nature, seemed to sense the truth. Her face grew dark. I breathed out quietly. In my last life, I tried to argue but was still branded a plagiarist. This time, at last, I could clear my name. But just in that moment, Ta Tone took Dao Chao's hand. Dao Chao burst into tears, nestling into Ta Tone's arms, trembling like a pear blossom in the wind. Ta Tone, you must believe me. Ta Tone held her shoulders, then turned to me and barked. You, apologize to your sister. Dao Chao bit her lip, glanced at me, her mouth curving into a half smile, half mockery. It was both a challenge and a blatant taunt. I simply watched the pair, devoted and affectionate. A wave of bitterness welled up inside me. Not for them. But for myself. In my last life, Ta Tone was just the same. He never believed me, even though I was the one he married properly. The first year after I married into the Ta family, Dao Chao came to visit. She accused me of stealing her hairpin and wept in front of Ta Tone. He stayed silent a long time, but in the end, made me kneel all night in the ancestral hall. Back then, I naively thought he was just confused for a moment. But it wasn't until I died, my soul leaving my body, that I found the hairpin under Ta Tone's pillow. Ta Tone loved Dao Chao madly. He bowed for her, broke his own legs for her, wrote poetry for her all his life. Loved her so much that even knowing it was all lies, he willingly crashed headlong into the wall. Loved her so much, he would use the humiliation of his own wife to buy a smile from the one he truly cared for. As for me, I was just a little mouse hiding in a dark corner, watching in silence, quietly hoping. I used to envy the love he gave my elder sister. And nursed the tiniest, most foolish hope. The hope that maybe, he would love me, even just a little. But I was wrong. So wrong it was almost laughable. A deep ache rose in my chest, and I could not hold back my tears. Wiping them away, I spoke, every word clear. If you trust my elder sister, then of course so do I. This is all just a ridiculous farce. I don't know who started it, but it certainly has nothing to do with my sister. Dao Chao's lips curved, mouthing silently at me. Dao you deserve this. With my words, the princess consort could only nod and let the matter pass. After the banquet, Ta Tone pulled me up roughly into the carriage. You, wait a moment. I have something to say. I glanced at him, my eyes utterly devoid of emotion. My elder sister is kind-hearted. She could never have plotted against you. If I find out who's responsible for this filth, I will not forgive them. I smiled calmly. Then please, Ta Tone, go to the magistrate, clear my name. His expression shifted. I looked at him, cold and distant. I had already guessed this ending, so not a single ripple stirred in my heart. If there's nothing more, I'd like to get out now. Something in my words displeased him. Suddenly, Ta Tone lost his temper. He gripped my wrist tightly, black eyes blazing. You are far too stubborn. He sighed, his voice softening. Chow might be at fault, but she's still to be my future wife. Why must you always push your luck? A woman should be gentle and virtuous. If you act like this, how am I supposed to like you? Across 2 lifetimes, it was the first time I'd ever heard Ta Tone say the word like. But all I felt was a nausea so strong I could hardly stand it. See? Even though he knows perfectly well what Dao Chow is truly like, he still indulges her, still protects her. And after that, he would turn and torment me, humiliate me. But what exactly had I done wrong? Suppressing my disgust, I yanked my hand free. Ta Tone, please show some respect. Ta Tone suddenly laughed. You're not so rigid as you used to be, you've even picked up some of your sister's pride. I know you've liked me for a long time. If your sister agrees, I'll take you as my concubine. What do you think? No. My face didn't change, my voice was soft but unyielding. Ta Tone, I do not agree. Ta Tone. I no longer love you. His face twisted, his voice grew harsh. Dao Yu, don't push your luck. You're just a second daughter, do you really think you can become the principal wife? Who else would marry you but me? But I want to marry her. A firm voice interrupted. I froze. That voice was so familiar. It was my confidant from my last life, Cui Baozhong. Just as I stood there, stunned, the carriage curtain was lifted. There he was, with phoenix eyes full of laughter, unrestrained and elegant. She's leaving. Don't dirty your hands. Ta Tone glared at me coldly. I forbid you to go. Cui Baozhong clicked his tongue and said. Ta Tone, you're engaged to the Dao family's eldest daughter, why are you entangling yourself with the younger one? What would people say if this got out? Besides, this is my doorstep. If I don't let her go, what right do you have to take her away? By the end, there was a distinct threat in his voice. Ta Tone finally let go. Not because he was afraid of Cui Baozhong, but because I had shattered a piece of jade pendant. The keepsake he gave me years ago in Qingzhou shattered in my hand, jade broken, stone turned to dust. Once, I mistook the man, now, breaking this jade, I sever what remains. The 5 years of feeling between us end here. Ta Tone, from now on, please treat my elder sister well. Don't come looking for me again. Ta Tone stood there, stunned, muttering softly. If you no longer love me, then why push Chow out into the wind? I only smiled and said nothing. To walk away intact today was already the greatest fortune of my life. If I dragged Dao Chow down with me, my mother would be the first to suffer. I couldn't bear to let her be hurt. That's why I was willing to let Dao Chow go. Ta Tone, this was never about you. You, in truth, were never that important. I quietly thanked Cui Baozhong. Cui Baozhong, the youngest son of the Prince Shou, was famed as a handsome, carefree, and frivolous gentleman. But in my previous life, he had helped me countless times. I knew the man behind the rumors was nothing like the world claimed. Our friendship began with poetry. But since I was already married, every meeting ended with just a quiet nod. Once, when Ta Tone fell gravely ill, I cut my own wrist to give blood for his medicine. That careless moment nearly cost me my life. If Cui Baozhong hadn't found a rare remedy, I might have died long ago. I always saw him as a confidant. He admired my poetry, much like Ta Tone in those distant Qingzhou days. But in this life, there should have been nothing tying us together. I didn't know why he'd helped me now, so after thanking him, I turned to leave. But Cui Baozhong called after me. Dao Yu. If you no longer love Ta Tone, could you try looking at someone else? I glanced back, lips curving in a faint smile. I'll try. A lie. It was time for me to leave the Dao family. I wouldn't be entangled with anyone else. Back at the Dao Chow's temper is like mine. If you dare make her unhappy, I'll make sure your mother never knows peace. I froze, then bowed even lower. Yes. The matriarch was narrow-minded. There was not a single concubine in the inner courtyard all these years. Long ago, my drunken father forced himself on my mother. That was how I came into the world. It was for this that the matriarch had always hated us. Dao Chow took after her, and for years only scolded and belittled me. Those days had been bitter enough. I could not live like that anymore. I had to leave. That night, the Dao Manor suddenly caught fire. Everywhere else was untouched. Only the quarters of the two young misses were consumed, flames raging so fiercely they made onlookers shudder. They said the bodies of the second daughter and her mother were burned beyond recognition. The eldest daughter was carried out of the flames by her betrothed, Ta Tone. Curiously, the Ta family's young master was engaged to the eldest, yet after hearing the second miss had perished, he dug at the earth with his own hands until they bled, but never found her body. The pain was so great he spat blood and lay in a coma for 7 days and nights. It was said that in his dreams, he kept calling for the second daughter, calling her Ching Ching, beloved wife. When the dead are gone, does love finally begin? And what of the living, what are they supposed to do? The storyteller's voice rang out through the tea house, his hand slapping the table at the dramatic peak, the whole place in awe. Only my mother sat restless, gripping my hand with worry. Child, I can see it, the young master of the Ta family, he truly does care for you. I squeezed her hand gently and said, Mother, don't worry. Since we chose to leave the Dao family, there's no reason to look back. And as for Ta Tone, did he really love me? All I felt was a faint, mocking bitterness. That year, when Dao Chow climbed into the arms of the third prince, she immediately broke her engagement with Ta Tone. Ta Tone, of course, could not accept it. Day and night for half a month, he wrote poetry to prove his devotion. The third prince, jealous and cruel, secretly had Ta Tone's leg broken. Dao Chow wept as she told Ta Tone, If you have feelings, how could I be heartless? A line so false it was almost laughable, yet it kept Ta Tone's heart captive. After that, Dao Chow married the third prince, but before long, she died mysteriously. And I married Ta Tone, carried the weight of his family my entire life, and finally died of exhaustion. The emperor, pitying my loyalty, personally wrote a couplet in my memory. My son and daughter wept endlessly at my coffin. Ta Tone himself went to court to plead for a posthumous title for me. A voice echoed in my mind. You were granted honor by the emperor, had children to mourn you, a husband who pleaded for you. With a life like that, what more could you possibly want? Yes, what more could I ask for? My eyes fell on the hairpin in the hair of a woman walking ahead. It looked so much like Dao Chow's old hairpin. I couldn't help but let out a soft, cold laugh. I already had my answer. Ta Tone's love, from beginning to end, belonged wholly to Dao Chow. As for me, I was nothing but a caged bird, gilded and forgotten. That's why I was never content. People admired my fate, all saying that Ta Tone was the finest husband in the world. But that so-called finest husband was never willing to share a grave with me when I died. I became a wandering spirit, nameless and without a tomb, never able to rest. While he, clutching a hairpin that once belonged to Dao Chow, was buried together with her. Cold and heartless to the end, he never changed. So, in this life, I refused to walk the same path. My mother and I moved to Qingzhou. Rented a quiet little courtyard beside a woman butcher. At first, mother was always gloomy and silent. When I asked her, she said nothing. I could only sigh, then quietly return to my poetry and books. Until one day, mother happened into a conversation with our neighbor. At last, I saw a hint of brightness return to her face. You, she said, all these years, it was I who was wrong. I looked up in surprise. Our neighbor was Madame Wang, a widow, childless and faithful for years. She had once had a husband, only to find out he already had a wife and children. That all his so-called love was just for money. When the scandal broke, his first wife came and clawed Madame Wang's face to shreds. Since then, she never wanted to remarry. But Madame Wang told me, she was not wrong, nor was the first wife. The only one at fault was that man. The one who changed his heart. Who left women jealous, fighting, full of pointless bitterness. I paused, a current swirling through my heart. I thought of Mother's ending in my previous life. How illness took root in her heart and she died 10 years before me, consumed by regret. I never understood why she harbored such pain. When it seemed I had married well and found a safe home. When she was no longer oppressed by the matriarch and even had a peaceful courtyard of her own. Why, then, did she still torture herself so? I looked at her quietly, eyes brimming with tears. But she, as if unaware, continued gently. All these years, the first wife and her daughter always hated me. Made me sick from the heart. Perhaps you didn't know, but I had a drunkard father. Who wanted nothing more than to sell me off to a brothel. If not for the master of the Dao family, I might never have even become a kitchen maid. When I entered the Dao household, I heard nothing but praise for the master and Madame's deep affection, no concubines in the rear courtyard for years. I truly admired them. Even when Madame and her daughter treated us badly. I always thought it was because I'd broken their marriage. They hated you. And I hated myself. I once hated being born with beauty. Hated that I happened to pass by the master's quarters that day. Hated that I didn't simply end my life and spare their family the pain. But you, there is one thing I never regretted, giving birth to you. I love you, and for you, I want to learn to let go. So that's how it was. A scalding tear landed in my palm, burning my skin. It felt like every inch of my heart was being slowly sliced open. After all these years, I realized I never truly understood Mother. Never knew my birth father had once been her savior. I grasped her hand tightly, each word steady and resolute. Mother, the troubles of their marriage were never because of you. If it hadn't been you, he would have forced himself on some other maid. All those so-called debts have long since been repaid. Please, don't think of it anymore. Mother's eyes softened, her smile gentle. Yes. I had meant to thank Madame Wang in person. I hadn't expected to run into Cui Baozhang. He greeted me politely, his smile gentle, his voice soft. You. At once, my face turned cold. There is no second miss of the Dao family here. So that was it. Madame Wang had started that heart-to-heart with my mother on purpose. Even if Cui Baozhang had once helped me, owed me a debt, I would never allow even a hint of trouble. His eyes, soft, affectionate, showed a fleeting hurt. I didn't mean, I. A voice cut in, silly boy, get inside. If you can't speak, let me. I stared. Madame Wang smiled, kind and radiant. This child may be the Prince Shou's son, but as a boy he nearly died and washed up here in Qingzhou. I found him and raised him as my own. Baozhang is sincere, he's never done you harm. If you trust me, why not give him a chance? Her warmth was hard to refuse. After 2 lifetimes, I could tell who was genuine and who was not. She went on. Don't mind me, girl. I only wanted to invite you and your mother for a meal today. Will you accept? With the invitation made so plainly, I could not refuse. Finally, Cui Baozhang broke into a bright grin. My foster mother's cooking is the best under heaven, just you wait. I could hear the eagerness in his voice and couldn't help but feel a little anticipation myself. Madame Wang, the butcher, had no shortage of fresh pork. She built up the fire, tossed pork bones into the pot, and the broth bubbled and steamed. She added star anise, peppercorns, pickled ginger, dried chili, a pinch of sugar, and finished it off with a ladle of sizzling oil. The hot pot soup was ready. The pork, sliced thin as cicada wings, curled instantly when dipped into the broth, dipped in chili sauce. The flavor was unmatched. Beside it were neatly arranged vegetables, all sorts of sauces, each plate crisp and refreshing. She also fried up a platter of yellow croaker. Each fish, with all the ingredients ready, Cui Baozhang brought out each dish into the courtyard. My mother laughed softly. Madam Wang, I haven't even started eating yet, but the fragrance is everywhere. Looks like we're in for a treat today. The few of us gathered around the round table. I'd never seen such an unusual way of dining in the capital. It was Cui Baozhang who, with new chopsticks, picked up a thin slice of pork and dropped it into the bubbling pot. Soon, the meat was tender and cooked. He ladled some hot broth into a bowl of dipping sauce, and the aroma drifted across the courtyard. He offered me the sauce and the piece of meat he'd just cooked. I bowed my head slightly, cheeks flushing, but accepted it with composure. Cui Baozhang's eyes sparkled. Well. I curved my lips in a smile. It's delicious. Just as you said, a true delicacy. His smile grew even brighter, as if a little proud to have pleased me. The spring breeze brushed my brow, one hand dipping meat, the other lifting a cup of good wine. I, too, felt utterly content. Meeting the eyes of those around the table, my heart felt gently warmed. Days like these, there's nothing better. I stayed in Qingzhou for 3 months. News from the Dao and Ta households in the capital arrived often. First, the Dao family couldn't find my body, so they buried what was left in a rough grave. Ta Tong refused to accept it and caused a commotion. He wore red to send off the coffin, claiming to be a grieving widower. Second, Dao Chao seemed dissatisfied with Ta Tong, and the two quarreled frequently. But while Ta Tong had always indulged Dao Chao, now he seemed almost deranged. Raising his voice, even pushing her once so her head hit the ground, leaving a scar. I thought they'd use this as an excuse to break off the engagement. But the third prince of my previous life never appeared. Perhaps he'd lost all interest in Dao Chao, the woman who once stirred up the entire capital. In the end, beside Dao Chao there was only Ta Tong. So, no matter what, she refused to end the engagement. Hearing all this, my heart was calm. Even felt a faint disgust. Ta Tong did not love me, nor did he truly love Dao Chao. The one he loved most, all along, was always himself. During those 3 months in Qingzhou, Cui Baozhang was always by my side. Sometimes I wondered, could he also remember a past life, like me? But from his actions, his words, I knew he was not reborn. He didn't recall wandering the capital searching for medicine for me. One day, Mother said she wanted to travel alone to Jinzhou. I was surprised and happy. All these years she'd only hovered around me, and now she wished to return to her hometown, to revisit old memories. I worried about her, but she winked mischievously. Don't worry, Baozhang has arranged someone to go with me. No one will bully me. I was relieved. Turning to Cui Baozhang, I bowed deeply in thanks. He arched his brow, shaking his head gently, his voice earnest. What concerns you concerns me. Your mother is my mother, too. There's no need to thank me. I froze for a moment. I knew Cui Baozhang had feelings for me. At least, I could sense it. But I didn't know when he had started to care. After all those years I'd chased after Ta Tong. I'd never looked at anyone else. Perhaps seeing my thoughts, Cui Baozhang spoke softly, his voice gentle as spring wind beneath the eaves. 5 years ago, when you and your mother were sent to Qingzhou, the bookstore there was part of my family's estate. I read the poems you wrote. Understood the joys and sorrows you tucked between the lines. Ta Tong and you once shared a soulmate's bond. But as for me, I have cherished you for a long, long time. I stared at him, stunned. So that's how it was. No wonder, in my last life, Cui Baozhang followed me through the capital, even searching for medicine for me. It was for this. My eyes stung, tears threatening to spill. Just then, a deep, familiar voice sounded behind me. I've finally found you. I turned. It was Ta Tong. He was thinner, frail and lonely, only skin and bones. The moment he saw me, his body went rigid, his eyes instantly turning red. So you really are here. When he noticed Cui Baozhang by my side, his gaze darkened. His words ground out as if through clenched teeth. You, come back with me. Marry me. I couldn't help but laugh, a low, incredulous sound. And why should I? Ta Tong suddenly laughed as well. His former poise was gone, there was even something reckless, desperate, about him, just like the end of his previous life. For one simple reason, I know the person you care for most is your mother. My pupils contracted, heart leaping into my throat. Now, I have the emperor's favor, and all you have to rely on is Cui Baozhang and the Prince Shou's household. But what if the Prince Shou's household fell? What would become of your mother? If you come back with me, I promise she will remain safe. I agreed to return with Ta Tong. First, for fear he would harm my mother. Second, to avoid implicating the Prince Shou's household. Truly, just as he said. He carried the memories of a previous life. He had stolen credit from many great officials. And so won the emperor's trust, his influence only growing. I had long suspected Ta Tong, too, had been reborn. But I never guessed that my fake death would wound him so deeply. After I returned to the Ta family, Ta Tong treated me with great care. He arranged for my quarters to be right next to his own. Every day, Ta Tong would come home exactly on time, and the first thing he did was come see me. On the surface, he truly seemed devoted. He stroked my hair, eyes full of longing. I'm so glad it's you. I'm so glad, in the end, I finally saw through Dao Chao. I gave a faint, mocking smile, fully understanding the meaning behind his words. Having lived another lifetime, Ta Tong could easily see through Dao Chao's tricks when she was just 16. He already knew, the person he once loved was never the pure white lotus she appeared to be. So now, he shifted all his affection onto me. How pitiful. Do you remember what my courtyard was called in our last life? I asked. Ta Tong froze. A place called Zhaoxue Pavilion. Even though Dao Chao was dead, she still bore the title of principal wife. Zhaoxue Pavilion. They said that year, Ta Tong once walked with Dao Chao under an umbrella through the snow. He told her, if in this life we can walk together in the snow, then let it be said we've grown old side by side. Once, Ta Tong longed to grow old walking in the snow with Dao Chao. Now, he used the name of that pavilion, to humiliate me. Ta Tong panicked, hurriedly seizing my hand. I'll make it up to you, I swear. Please believe me. His eyes brimmed with affection, but I saw right through it. A moment later, I pulled my hand away, my face utterly calm. If you truly love me, then break off the engagement with Dao Chao. You know she's the one I resent most in this life. I once truly wished you would marry me in grand ceremony, let me enter the Ta household openly. Ta Tong's face lit up with joy, he nodded eagerly. He said he would do it, no matter what. I only smiled faintly inside. Is that so? I hope you mean it. Sure enough, Ta Tong took the initiative to annul the engagement with Dao Chao. Dao Chao refused. It said they argued fiercely, their words cutting like knives. In the end, Dao Chao wept, clinging to him, but Ta Tong's heart was already wavering. When he returned home, I flung the object in my hand at him. I shouted. Ta Tong, you're truly useless. The next day, when Ta Tong met with her again, his expression was fiercer than ever. No one knows what methods he used, but Dao Chao finally relented. She tried to stall, but Ta Tong pushed her so hard she nearly fell into the pond. In the end, the engagement was broken. Ta Tong returned home triumphant. As for me, I quietly calculated in my heart. The day of their deaths. To marry you across 2 lifetimes, I would drink bitterness as if it were honey. Last time, I married you without true feeling, but afterward I truly did love you. In this life, to meet again with our hearts aligned, nothing could be sweeter. And don't forget, we had 2 children together, you wouldn't want to part with them, would you? I lowered my gaze, utterly unmoved. Even as he mentioned the 2 children I'd borne. Yes, once I had a son and daughter, both raised by my own hand from infancy. But they always knew, the moon their father cherished was never me, but Dao Chao. They once raged, but after I died, when Ta Tone secretly dumped my body in a wild field outside the city. It was those same children, born from my own body, who saw everything with their own eyes. Once, I foolishly thought they'd stop him. But they didn't. They were silent, accepting. My son said, "Aunt Chao is beautiful and gentle. Of course father loves her." My daughter nodded, "Now that we've lost mother, we must listen to father, let's not make him sad again." In their eyes, I could never compare to Ta Tone. Or rather, never compare to Dao Chao. A whole lifetime of marriage, finished here. So in this life, I would never again give birth to two more ungrateful wolves. I took Ta Tone's hand, smiled softly, and said, "Yes, we once had two children. You must truly cherish them." The celebrated hero of the Ta family was dead. Not by assassination, not by natural disaster. But killed by a woman's hand. They said, on that day, a madwoman charged at Ta Tone. He, weak and helpless, was stabbed again and again, died beneath her blade. Just before he died, his face was filled with shock. He managed only one last whisper, "You." Some recognized the woman as the eldest daughter of the Dao family. The entire capital buzzed with gossip. At first, the emperor was furious. But then the Prince Shou's household submitted a memorial. As it turned out, most of Ta Tone's so-called achievements had been stolen from others. Poetry, flood control strategy, even matters of state. Somehow, it had all ended up in Ta Tone's name. The state preceptor quietly said, Ta Tone was a monster all along. His death is no loss. The emperor, hearing this, finally relaxed and let the matter drop. A monster. Then there's nothing to regret. Cui Baozhang asked me how I'd known Dao Chao would kill. I only smiled, recalling a memory. Years ago, after Dao Chao married the third prince, they were called a fairy couple. Dao Chao never once set foot in the Ta household. But I'd heard, after the third prince took a concubine, the two quarreled fiercely. From then on, Dao Chao began occasionally visiting the Ta house. I remembered well, rumor had it she died of malaria. But when Ta Tone and I visited, her face was ruddy, healthy. So the illness was just a cover. What was stranger, the third prince never had children in his life. Yet in this life, the third prince had many sons and grandsons. So I guessed, Dao Chao was just like the Dao matriarch. Narrow-minded, vicious, and deeply suspicious. But Dao Chao was far more cruel. Who knows what she did to ensure the third prince could never have children. So, in my past life, he had her quietly put to death. Ta Tone still held a sliver of softness for Dao Chao. So I was the one who finally severed that last thread of tenderness. Once Dao Chao realized Ta Tone's true indifference, of course she went mad. I thought she might report him to the authorities, or cause a scandal. At the very least, ruin him in the emperor's eyes. I thought if I just waited for the Prince Shou's house to act, the emperor would surely have him executed. But I didn't expect that love would breed desire, and hate, murder. Dao Chao killed Ta Tone herself. In the end, perhaps that was best. Mother asked me what would happen between Cui Baozhang and me. I hooked my pinky around hers and smiled. We'll let things happen as they may. However it turns out is fine. As long as you and I are together, everything will be all right. The end.